What if everything you've been told about the first woman was a lie? What if Eve wasn't Adam's first partner? And what if the real first woman was so powerful, so terrifying to the forces of heaven and hell, that her name was buried for centuries? Her name was Lilith, and her story is the one they never wanted you to hear. Welcome to a journey deep into the forbidden corners of ancient texts, mysticism, and forgotten history. In this video, we uncover the true origins of Lilith, a figure cast out, demonized, yet never defeated. Was she truly a demon mother of chaos, or was she something far more dangerous, a free woman in a world built to silence her? From ancient Sumerian tablets to Jewish folklore, from the Garden of Eden to modern feminism, Lilith's story spans ages. Her fall, her rebellion, her children, and her return. This is the untold saga of Adam's first wife and the original mother of demons. Before there was Eve, the mother of all living, there was Lilith, the woman most people were never told about. Her name does not appear in your standard Sunday school curriculum. She is not part of the Genesis to creation story you grew up with. And yet, in ancient Jewish mysticism, the Talmud, the alphabet of Ben Sira, and even earlier Mesopotamian mythology, Lilith stands as one of the most haunting figures in the cosmic drama of humanity's origins. Lilith is not just a myth or a fringe idea whispered in the shadows of forgotten scrolls. She is a figure that embodies rebellion, raw independence, sexual power, and a terrifying descent into the supernatural. She has been called the first feminist, the first demoness, the dark mirror of Eve. But who was she really, and why was her story erased, or worse, vilified? To begin this story, we must go far back beyond the Garden of Eden, beyond the Genesis that made it into the Bible, into the oral traditions, Gnostic whispers that circulated long before the canon was finalized. These ancient tales claim that when God created humanity, He first made man and woman at the same time from the same earth. That woman's name was Lilith, unlike Eve, who was fashioned from Adam's rib in a later account. Lilith came into existence as Adam's equal, not his subordinate. But equality, it seems, came with consequences. The ancient texts claim that Adam and Lilith quarreled constantly, especially about one thing: dominance. Lilith refused to be beneath Adam literally and figuratively. She would not submit to him in the marriage bed or in matters of will. She saw herself as his equal in every way, because they were created from the same substance. But Adam demanded control. And when Lilith refused, she spoke the ineffable name of God and flew away from Eden. Think about that for a moment. A woman who invoked the sacred name of God, an act of immense power and danger in ancient Hebrew thought, and fled paradise on her own terms. Not cast out, not tempted, she left. This is not the fall of Eve. This is the rebellion of Lilith. Where did she go? The legends say she fled to the Red Sea, a place associated with desolation and demons. There, she consorted with fallen angels, some say the very same watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon in the Book of Enoch. From that union, she birthed legions of demonic offspring spirits, who would go on to haunt humanity in the night, afflicting infants, seducing men in dreams, and embodying chaos. But God, according to the alphabet of Ben Sira, did not let her departure go unchallenged. He sent 3 angels, Senoi, Sansanoi, and Semangelov to bring her back. They found her by the waters, surrounded by her children, but she refused to return. As punishment, the angels declared that every day 100 of her children would die. In rage and anguish, Lilith swore vengeance not against God, but against the children of Adam and Eve. She would haunt newborns, lure men, and become the queen of demons. It is here that Lilith becomes more than just a spurned woman. She becomes the prototype of demonic seduction, the spiritual force behind nighttime terrors and forbidden lust. Her name appears in incantation bowls, amulets, and protective charms dating as far back as the 5th century BCE. In some Mesopotamian tablets, the term Lilichu refers to a class of wind spirits or female demons who roamed the night. Lilith is both a being and a symbolic convergence of ancient fears around feminine power, independence, and sexuality, and yet she was not always viewed with terror. In some mystical texts, Lilith was regarded with a strange reverence as a necessary force of balance in the cosmos. If Eve symbolized obedience and harmony, Lilith represented freedom and unbridled will. Two archetypes of womanhood, two polar opposites born from the same divine soil. Over time, however, Lilith's name became synonymous with danger. The patriarchal religious orders of the Second Temple period and beyond had no place for a woman who would not bow, so her name was buried, her story fragmented across apocryphal scrolls, scattered midrashim, and mystical writings like the Zohar. She became the first woman erased from collective memory, not because she sinned, but because she refused to be less than a man. But if she was so dangerous, why was she remembered at all? Because even in fear, people remembered her. Parents hung charms above the cribs of newborns with inscriptions to ward off Lilith. Her name became a whispered warning, a cautionary tale of what happens when a woman dares to say no. She was feared, yes, but she was never forgotten. In our modern day, Lilith has been reclaimed by some as a feminist icon, a goddess of resistance, a symbol of self-possession. But whether you see her as demon, deity, or distorted myth, the question remains: why was her story omitted from our sacred texts? What were ancient scribes and theologians so afraid of? The answer lies not only in her rebellion but in her power. And the deeper we dive into her story, the more we'll uncover a complex, chilling, and even redemptive vision of the first woman who said no to Eden. To understand the full force of Lilith's transformation, from the first woman to the mother of demons, we must follow the trail beyond Eden and into the earliest mythologies of the ancient Near East. Long before the alphabet of Ben Sira gave her a name and a role in the garden, the roots of Lilith's dark legend were already coiled deep in the soil of Mesopotamian religion. In Sumerian and Akkadian texts, some dating back to over 2000 BCE, we encounter terrifying female spirits known as Lilichu, Arded Lily, and Lilu. These were not just poetic metaphors for nighttime fears. They were real spiritual entities to the ancients, winged demons who roamed the desert, attacked women in childbirth, preyed on infants, and seduced men in their dreams to drain their vitality. The Lilichu were understood as dangerous, winged creatures, beautiful yet deadly, and while they were not yet called Lilith, the resemblance is undeniable. One of the earliest references is the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, where a female demon described as a Lilith-type figure is found dwelling in a sacred tree alongside serpents and dark spirits. She is a force of chaos, an interloper in spaces reserved for the divine. This archetype would survive through centuries and be absorbed into Jewish folklore as Lilith's synthesis of ancient fears about femininity, wilderness, and disobedience. As Jewish mysticism developed, particularly in the Babylonian exile and later in the rise of Kabbalah, Lilith was folded into an increasingly complex spiritual universe. She wasn't just a demon who fled Eden. She became a cosmic adversary, a shadow bride of Samael, the dark counterpart to the archangel Michael. In Kabbalistic writings like the Zohar, Lilith appears not only as a seductress, but as a structured, metaphysical reality, the feminine face of demonic energy. The Zohar teaches that while Eve came from the side of Adam, the side of light, Lilith came from the husks, the cliffeth, the outer shells that contain divine sparks, but twist them into darkness. According to this worldview, the universe was not simply divided between good and evil. It was layered, and Lilith existed in the hidden folds, just outside the visible light. She was the queen of the Sitra Achra, the other side, a parallel realm of impure spirits that mirrored the divine world, but subverted it. Just as God had a Shekinah, a divine feminine presence, so to Samael had Lilith, a dark Shekinah. This made her not just a folkloric demon, but a theological necessity in a dualistic cosmos. She was the female principle of evil, a seductress and devourer, a goddess of inversion. This version of Lilith reigned as a sexual predator in dreams, a tormentor of newborns, and a corrupter of men. She was blamed for nocturnal emissions. Night demons was a euphemism for involuntary sexual release. In this way, Lilith became the explanation for male temptation and guilt. Her name was scrolled on protective amulets, often alongside the names of angels tasked with restraining her. Images of Lilith in medieval Jewish art show her with wings, talons, and long flowing hair, half beauty, half beast. But Lilith was never only a creature of Jewish tradition. As her legend spread, it adapted to new cultures. In Christian demonology, Lilith became associated with succubi, female demons who seduced men in their sleep, often as a form of spiritual warfare. In Islamic tradition, though Lilith by name does not appear, similar entities exist under the category of jinn, especially those that haunt the desert or possess women. The resonance is global, and yet, through all these transitions, Lilith's core identity remained astonishingly consistent. She is the woman who would not submit. This is perhaps the most enduring thread in her mythos. Her refusal to yield to Adam, to angels, to divine authority, brands her not only as a villain, but as a warning. Religious orders dominated by male power had little room for such a figure, so she was demoted, degraded, and demonized. And yet, she persisted. In some legends, it is said that Lilith appears at night to women in childbirth, attempting to steal their infants. But the protection is not prayer alone, it's the knowledge of her true name, or the invocation of angels who once sought to bring her back. This reveals something curious. Lilith, for all her power, can be restrained only by remembrance. Her greatest threat is being forgotten, not defeated. Some mystical traditions even claimed that the Messiah would one day defeat Lilith not with a sword, but by healing the division between Adam and his first wife. That in the Messianic age, Lilith would be reconciled and transformed, a radical idea that even the queen of demons might one day be redeemed. So where do we stand with her today? In the modern era, Lilith has taken on yet another form. She is a symbol, a banner for those who resist patriarchal narratives. In feminist circles, she represents the original woman wronged by the system. Her defiance, once seen as monstrous, is now interpreted as a necessary force of balance. Lilith's resurgence in art, literature, and even television reflects our cultural struggle to reckon with the shadows of our past, especially the ones that involve silenced women. But this reimagining is not without tension. To fully reclaim Lilith, we must grapple with her duality. She is not just a goddess of empowerment. She is a creature born from pain, rage, and cosmic rejection. Her children, the demons she birthed, are metaphors for trauma, vengeance, and the darkness that comes when justice is denied. To honor her story is not to sanitize it, but to face it honestly. Lilith forces us to ask, what happens to the stories we exclude from Scripture? What truths were too dangerous to preserve? And what myths return to haunt us when we bury them? Her name, once a whisper of fear, now echoes loudly again, not as a villain, but as a voice. As Lilith evolved from ancient demoness to mystical queen, her legend became intertwined with one of the most mysterious narratives in all of ancient spiritual literature, the story of the Watchers, fallen angels who descended to earth and corrupted humanity. This tale, preserved most clearly in the Book of Enoch, tales of 200 divine beings led by a powerful figure named Semyaza. These angels, meant to be guardians of mankind, instead took human wives, birthed monstrous hybrid offspring, and taught forbidden knowledge that shattered the balance of heaven and earth. But what if Lilith was not only a parallel story but part of theirs? In later Jewish mystical texts and hidden midrashic fragments, Lilith's path crosses with that of the Watchers. She is said to have taken these fallen angels as lovers, as a primordial being born before Eve, and as one who had defied both Adam and the command of heaven. Lilith would have resonated with the Watchers, beings who, like her, rebelled against divine hierarchy. In this way, Lilith becomes not just a demonized woman, but a spiritual nexus for celestial rebellion. Their union was not symbolic. It was said to produce offspring, demonic, hybrid creatures that roamed the earth in secret. These were not the Nephilim of Genesis 6, born of human women, but rather a second generation of chaos, spirit beings who could not be killed, who hungered for flesh and corrupted the hearts of men from the shadows. They were Kol, Searim, Shedim, or even Lilim, a name clearly derived from their mother, Lilith. This bloodline of darkness gave Lilith even more power. She was no longer just the first woman. She was now the queen mother of all demonic entities. Her name would be invoked in fear wherever sickness spread, wherever children died in infancy, wherever lust overcame reason. In mystic writings, it was taught that these children of Lilith and the Watchers became the foot soldiers of spiritual warfare, especially active at night, in dreams, in secret temptation. The Book of Enoch, though it does not name Lilith directly, speaks of evil spirits that proceed from the dead Nephilim after the flood spirits, that were neither fully angel nor human. They roamed the earth, it says, because they were born of heaven and earth. Lilith, as a primordial being formed from the same dust as Adam, fits this pattern. She too is a creature born of both realms, neither fully divine nor mortal. Her union with the Watchers sealed her position in this in-between world, making her the queen of the restless and the damned. This relationship also reframes her rebellion. Lilith did not just flee Eden out of pride, she fled into the arms of those who would overturn the order of heaven itself. The fallen angels gave her power, they honored her freedom, and in return, she gave them the intimacy of a divine feminine presence, one unshackled by obedience. Together, they birthed a counter-kingdom in the shadows, and that kingdom still echoes through mystical and occult lore. In Kabbalistic texts, Samael, the angel of death and adversary, takes Lilith as his bride. Some writings merge Samael with Azazel, one of the leaders of the Watchers. Whether these are the same being or symbolic layers of the same rebellion, Lilith is always positioned as their counterpart. Where Michael leads the armies of light, Samael and Lilith lead the forces of seduction, chaos, and spiritual deception. But not all traditions condemned her equally. In some esoteric sects, Lilith was viewed with awe. She was the hidden mother, the lost aspect of the divine feminine, the dark side of wisdom. In Gnostic teachings, especially among groups like the Cephians, the idea of Sephir, the wisdom of God who fell into the material world, bears eerie similarities to Lilith. Both represent feminine power cast out of heaven. Both seek knowledge, both suffer, and both are demonized. This raises a dangerous question. Was Lilith ever truly evil, or was she a scapegoat punished for holding knowledge and power that men feared? It's telling that Lilith's most dangerous weapon is not violence, but seduction. The ancients feared that she would enter a man's dreams, inflame his desires, and lead him astray. But what is that fear really about? It's about the power of an independent woman, one who cannot be possessed, who chooses her own lovers, who refuses to be silent. In a world shaped by patriarchal hierarchy, such a woman must be cast as a demon. The myth of Lilith and the Watchers is more than folklore. It's a mirror. It shows us what happens when divine beings defy the roles assigned to them, when women reject submission, when forbidden unions are formed not out of lust, but out of shared rebellion against unjust systems. Their children, be they Nephilim or demons, are symbolic of the unintended consequences of suppressed truth. When wisdom is exiled, when the feminine is demonized, what is born is distortion, not because women or angels are evil, but because suppression warps what should be whole. So Lilith's story, especially her forbidden union with the Watchers, is not just a tale of lust and demons. It is the story of cosmic imbalance, of light and shadow, of what happens when creation tries to silence half of itself. And though her name still stirs fear in traditional texts, her legend endures because it speaks to something deeper, the primal memory of a woman who would not bow and who joined forces with those who dared to fall. As the centuries passed, Lilith's story continued to evolve, pushed to the margins, shrouded in fear, yet never forgotten. She slipped from myth into mysticism, from religion into ritual, While mainstream theology condemned her, those who sought hidden knowledge, mystics, witches, and esoteric scholars began to uncover her story in whispers and shadows. Lilith was not merely remembered, she was summoned. In the medieval Kabbalistic traditions, Lilith took on a new and terrifying form. She was no longer just the rebellious wife or the mother of demons. She became the dark bride, the queen of the night, consort to Samael, the angel of death. In these mystical writings, the divine realm was split into 10 emanations or sephirot, reflecting different aspects of God's nature. But beneath these holy aspects was the Qliphoth, a mirror world of corrupted forces, and at the heart of this shadow realm stood Lilith. Lilith became the embodiment of the Qliphothic feminine, the raw, untamed, and destructive power that existed as the dark reflection of Shekinah, the divine feminine presence of God. While Shekinah dwelled in holiness, Lilith reigned in exile, but both were necessary. The balance of the cosmos, according to these mystics, depended not on the elimination of Lilith but on her integration. She was not a monster to be destroyed, but a force to be understood. Kabbalistic texts even speak of rectifying Lilith, a process not of condemnation, but of elevation. It was believed that through spiritual purification, Lilith could be redeemed, restored to her rightful place, not as a demon, but as a holy feminine power who had been misunderstood, misused, and exiled. This idea sent shockwaves through Jewish mysticism and later spilled into Western esotericism. By the time the Renaissance and Enlightenment brought new waves of occult revival to Europe, Lilith was rising again, but this time in a different form. Occultists began to see her not as a creature of sin, but as a symbol of spiritual autonomy. In 19th and 20th century magical circles, especially among theosophists, Rosicrucians, and early feminist spiritualists, Lilith was invoked as a goddess of rebellion, a patron of witches, and a liberator of women's sexuality. Witchcraft texts from this era often refer to Lilith as a mother of night, a being who offers secret knowledge, protection, and the power to defy oppression. Unlike the patriarchal angels and prophets of mainstream scriptures, Lilith represented an unchained energy, raw, Luna, instinctual. She became associated with the moon's dark phase, with dreams and visions, with sacred sexuality, and with the shadow self that must be embraced for true transformation. Even in modern Wiccan and pagan traditions, Lilith has become a powerful figure. She is called upon in rituals of liberation, invoked in circles seeking to reconnect with the divine feminine, and honored as one who was never tamed by gods or men. She is not worshipped in the way Yahweh or Christ might be, but she is revered as an archetype, a flame of rebellion in a world that still fears powerful women. Yet, the fear has never fully disappeared. In protective Jewish amulets from the Middle Ages, Lilith's name was inscribed not to honor her, but to ward her off. Mothers would hang these amulets above cradles, invoking angels like Senoi, Sansenoi, and Semangelov, who, according to legend, were sent by God to stop Lilith from harming children. Ironically, her name had power both as a shield and as a threat. Even in rejection, she was never forgotten. The duality of Lilith, mother and murderer, lover and destroyer, rebel and queen, has made her a complex symbol for centuries. And perhaps that's why she survives, because Lilith does not offer easy answers. She is not the pure, obedient Eve. She is not the nurturing Virgin Mary. She is something older, darker, and wilder, something that humanity has always both needed and feared. In psychology, Carl Jung referred to figures like Lilith as expressions of the shadow, the repressed aspects of our psyche that we project onto monsters, devils, and witches. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim our full selves. To confront Lilith is to ask, what have we exiled within ourselves? What truths have we buried beneath centuries of dogma and shame? For modern feminists, Lilith has become a rallying symbol. In the 1970s, the Lilith Fair Music Festival celebrated women's voices in art and music. In scholarly circles, she is studied as a lens through which to understand the historical fear of feminine power. In pop culture, she appears in everything from video games to novels to TV shows as a demon queen, a sorceress, or a vengeful ex-lover of God's chosen. Each retelling says more about us than it does about her. Ultimately, Lilith's endurance speaks to something primal in the human story. She's the cry of the outcast, the flame of those who refuse to be broken, the whisper in the dark that says, I was here before you, and I will not bow. Whether seen as villain or victim, demon or goddess, Lilith remains one of the most compelling figures in all of spiritual history, and perhaps that's because she never died. She simply stepped into the shadows and waited for us to follow. Lilith, once cast into the wilderness of forgotten myth and demonized scripture, is now rising again not as a threat to be exorcised, but as a symbol to be reclaimed. In our modern age, where questions of power, identity, gender, and autonomy rage louder than ever, Lilith's story has found new life. The woman who refused to bow is no longer a whisper in the shadows. She's a voice echoing across art, politics, and spirituality. Today, Lilith stands at the crossroads of tradition and rebellion. In feminist circles, she is embraced as the first woman who said no, before Eve, before Mary, before any woman in the patriarchal texts who obeyed without question. Lilith stood her ground. She challenged divine authority. She chose exile over submission. This act, once condemned as monstrous, is now celebrated as radical courage. In psychology, particularly in Jungian and depth traditions, Lilith has emerged as a powerful archetype representing the dark feminine side of womanhood that society has historically repressed: sexual agency, rage, intuition, wildness, grief, and defiance. She is not meant to replace the nurturing maternal figure, but to complete her. A whole psyche, Jung argued, must integrate both light and shadow. Lilith is the shadow misunderstood but vital. In modern Judaism, especially within mystical and progressive circles, there is a growing movement to reclaim Lilith not as a demon, but as a divine aspect of the feminine. Some Kabbalistic scholars argue that Lilith's fall was not her fault, but the result of an imbalance in the divine order, one that needs healing, not hatred. Her myth becomes a mirror reflecting humanity's long history of suppressing feminine wisdom. Correcting that imbalance isn't just theological, it's deeply human. In pop culture, Lilith's presence has exploded. She appears in films as the alluring villainess, in TV series as a queen of hell, in novels as a tragic anti-hero, and in music as a symbol of female empowerment. From Lucifer on Netflix to Lilith Fair in the music industry, her name carries weight, both mystery and magnetism. Audiences resonate with her not because she is evil, but because she is free, dangerous, perhaps, but never docile. Even in political discourse, Lilith surfaces. Her defiance is seen as a call to challenge unjust systems, to stand firm against power structures that demand silence and obedience. She embodies the cost of freedom, the pain of exile, and the fire of resistance. Her myth speaks to survivors, to outsiders, to those who've been told they're too much, too loud, too angry, too sexual, too different. Lilith answers, be everything they fear. In the world of spirituality, Lilith is honored in rituals by witches, priestesses, and energy workers who invoke her for protection, transformation, and truth. She represents the hidden wisdom of the night, the intuition that knows what logic can't explain. She is the guide through the underworld, helping seekers confront their buried trauma, ancestral wounds, and internalized shame. To work with Lilith is to confront what has been denied and to reclaim it with power. Interestingly, even in astrology, there is a point called Black Moon Lilith, representing the raw, untamed feminine in one's birth chart. Astrologers interpret this point as indicating where a person may experience suppression, taboo desires, or rebellion against control. In this way, Lilith's myth becomes personal. She isn't just a figure in a book, she's a part of your psyche, your path, your wound, and your liberation. But with all this power comes danger, because reclaiming Lilith means facing uncomfortable truths. It means acknowledging that not all rebellion is pretty, that some wounds bleed before they heal, that some freedom costs exile. Lilith isn't safe, but she is honest. She doesn't offer comfort. She offers truth. In a time when religious dogma is being questioned, when institutions are crumbling, and when new spiritual movements are emerging, Lilith stands as a torchbearer not of chaos, but of awakening. She invites us to rewrite the old myths, to ask, what if the demon was never evil, but exiled? What if the truth was buried beneath fear? What if power, when it refuses to bow, becomes holy? Lilith's story is not just about the past, it's about the present. Her myth is a lens through which we see our own world more clearly. It's about how we treat women, how we handle dissent, how we relate to our own darkness. She is not just Adam's first wife, she is humanity's mirror. And perhaps that's why she still terrifies, not because she is evil, but because she refuses to be tamed. She is the voice that says, I was created equal. I will not lie beneath. I will not be silenced. Lilith is not coming back. She never left. She was simply waiting for us to open the door. Lilith's story is not just mythology, it's a reflection of human struggle. Freedom versus control, voice versus silence, and light vs. shadow. Whether you see her as a demon, a goddess, or an archetype, one thing is undeniable: Lilith will not be forgotten. If this video opened your eyes, like, comment, and share it with those curious about the secrets hidden beneath scripture. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep, myth-busting explorations like this one. The truth has been buried long enough. Now, It's rising.